we're giving you a look into the secret strategies and tactics closely held by the biggest investment banks, private equity firms, and hedge funds. I'm Ben Summers, founder of Adagio Group and author of The Shadow Banker's Secrets, Investment Banking for Alternatives. This video series will take the power of capital creation from Wall Street to your Main Street, one secret at a time. The big motivation for doing this is that the ideas and the concepts and the driving forces behind the chaos we see are complex. And it's one thing to write about that in a book, but it's something else to have a familiar conversation. Like you and I have talked about for a long time. It's different when you're engaged, when you're having a dialogue, when you're working together, versus reading black and white on a page. So the hope is to, from my perspective, to walk people through a similar path that you went through to gain some of the sort of firsthand insights that drive what's going on today.
Exactly. Well, no, that's the thing. I mean, and I can speak to it from an organic perspective, Ben, because, I mean, and I've known Ben for about, I guess, 7-8 years now. But really the last couple of years when we've done some projects together and I started to really dissect what you do and some of the infrastructure that you've built. It took me personally, even though, I mean, I'm a savvy real estate investor. I bought a couple hundred units and had a lot of success. You know, I always joke with you, I only understand about 40% of what you say. So, you know, when I've talked with people that have read your book, read the content, everybody's blown away by the intelligence aspect of it. But a lot of people still don't understand it at a layman's terms level. And because of our friendship, you know, I'm thankful that you've been able to talk with me and I can kind of dissect what you've done and ask you again and again the same questions until I do understand it, to where when the light bulb goes off, it changes everything. And so that's the purpose of today's call and today's podcast, I guess, is to give everybody else that sees this content, everybody in my network, everybody in your network, the opportunity to have a fraction of the access that you gave me and make this available in a way that people can understand it. You know, basically kind of let them in on the conversations that we have together. And because I really do believe it's needed right now. I mean, we're seeing rapid inflation, which you've been talking about for years. I've been talking about it for years on webinars I've done. We're seeing chaos with the Ukraine and Russia situation. The financial markets are in flux. And so right now is the time when I want everybody in my network to be protected. I know you feel the same way. And honestly, aside from just being protected and feeling safe, we want everybody to be excited, right? Because there's an opportunity here. That's the thing. It's not just save yourself. There's an opportunity to capitalize on that can change your lifestyle in a positive way.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And for me personally, it's a double-edged sword to an extent. Right now, like there's hardship created by the macro turbulence at every turn. But on the flip side, it's beginning to bring people's attention to really important ideas that I think may have been neglected for a very long time. So, for example, maybe not a lot of people, but at least a decent number have been aware of the fact that the Fed prints money, right? That fractional reserve banking allows commercial banks to print money. And most people, even the few who are aware of this stuff, are kind of like, well, what can you do about it? Just kind of like, it's just how things are and I'm just a victim. Well, my mission, what I've done, is to take those same processes and that same expertise to anybody with the will and the motivation to hear and to move on it, to actually create capital and monetize it in perfectly analogous ways. So now it's not like, oh, creating capital is just something the banking system can do. Well, it's now something that you can do too. It always has been, actually. And again, it's my intent to bring that wherewithal to as many people as I can.
Well, and that's the mission statement that we really connected on, right? Because, I mean, it's about taking, all these things have been done since the inception of our country, since the inception of the financial system, right? But normally it's the big banks, it's the Wall Street guys that are doing this, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley. What I love about what you've done, and it connects perfectly with everything that I've preached in my network for a decade plus now, is that you put that same type of knowledge and resources in the hands of the individual. And the funny thing is, it's like I was just talking with one of your client, our mutual associates, that's invested within some of the strategies that you've done the other day. And I said anybody can do this, but it's that barrier, that knowledge barrier, to where at first it seems like it's so complex, you just don't even try. And that's what the media pushes. That's what the big banks want the media to push, is that, you know what, it's too complicated, you can't figure it out, so don't even try it. Just leave it to us. We'll give you your 2.5% CD rates for a 5-year lockup, and we'll take the 40% upside on the back end, so don't even mess with it. What you've done is you've given people access to that opportunity, and once that light bulb goes off, like me and your other client were discussing, it goes off, and then it's so simple to some extent.
Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of things, right? Everything new feels complicated. And I don't want to misrepresent the fact that finance is a complicated discipline. I mean, I'm not talking about the sales function, but hardcore finance, quantitative analysis, financial engineering, it's complicated. But arguably not that much more complicated than wholesaling real estate. Like if you think about the first time you tried to negotiate an owner-financed property, right? It probably the seller probably thought you were speaking Greek, right? And I think one of the hurdles,
Well,
I think,
thought I had a 400 credit score. Anyway.
touche. But when you talk about creative structures in real estate, especially a decade or so ago, that was extremely complex and esoteric, and like you're on the fringe if you even bring it up. And I mean, people were studying how do you even broach the subject with a potential seller. And now it's relatively mainstream. And my intent is to bring financial engineering practices that are sort of held in secret to the public, and so that they become equally as familiar. And that sort of, as you pointed out, sort of air of complexity is kind of removed, and people feel that it's more accessible.
Well, and that's the cool. I mean, you just made me think of something too, Ben, because I mean, it's like Bitcoin's a perfect example of what you're talking about too, maybe even more so than like on the real estate side, because I remember my web developer that worked for me in 2012 told me about Bitcoin, and at the time, and people, honestly, when I say this, I feel like people are going to not even remember how crazy it was to think about buying Bitcoin in 2012. I mean, it almost felt like you were doing a drug deal to try to buy cryptocurrency. And so anyhow, but he told me about it back then. Had I bought that, I'd have like a net worth of $70 million right now, like anybody would. But at the time, it sounded crazy. I didn't understand it. I passed on it. I bought gold and silver instead, more real estate, so on and so forth, whatever it is. I regret that, obviously. With what you're doing, for a lot of people on this call or to get to see this content, it might have that same kind of feel to where they don't even understand what we're talking about, so they just tune it out. But what you're doing, we've already seen it in the 18 months that we've really been working together. We've seen people starting to adopt at an institutional level some of the things that you teach, and it become more and more common. So anybody that gets access to this and what you're preaching now kind of has that Bitcoin advantage, I guess I could call it, over the rest of the market, to where you're going to have an opportunity to see something that 5-10 years from now is going to be commonplace, and right now it's not. Do you agree with that?
I agree, and like I think you mentioned you want to talk about today, like my evolution is evidence and proof of that, right? Yeah, I grew up in the swamps of Louisiana, right? Like finance beyond like your retail financial advisory is something that's just unheard of. It's not even thought about, right?